I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Oh, man.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
To get the Crime Writers on Aftershow right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And this week, BBC Radio brings us to Donegal to explore Ireland's most infamous missing child case in No Body Recovered. Then HBO wraps a murder mystery inside a supernatural thriller with their adaptation of Stephen King's The Outsider. Joining me to get that done and more is my real-life husband and true crime co-author, former TV journalist, and podcast college professor, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
You're so professorial, Kevin.
Do I look professorial?
No, you're wearing a hoodie and a white T-shirt.
But I have corduroy patches on the elbows of my
But we should tell
hoodie.
people you're actually teaching a class now in podcasting. It's very exciting.
I am. I'm teaching an evening class at the Loeb School of Communication. It's a little... free.
Can we call it a college class? I mean, it's...
you called it a college class.
I did. It's a cooperative extension higher learning course.
Yeah, it's
adult ed.
Exactly. It's a free class. We've got about 20 people, and they want to learn about what podcasting is. And,
yeah.
I think next time there might be a prerequisite about
audio editing,
how to open your laptop.
Wow.
But yeah,
but you
it's
love
really
your
good.
students.
Yeah, we're talking. Yeah, it's really great talking to people of different ages and different interests, and it's a real spread of different people. It's been good for me.
Nice. Also with us is journalist.
It also destroys my voice. What's left of it?
Yes.
And I come in afterwards.
It's okay. We next week we will be recording on a different night.
It's been so long, nobody remembers what I really sound like.
That's true. It probably is true. People probably don't even remember that you didn't used to be a sexy Demi Moore style podcaster.
Well, maybe when we start playing clips from our 200th episode, a special show.
Yes.
We have folks who are sending us voice messages and other clips and things that they want to hear.
That's right.
So if you've been around for 200 episodes
or less,
or fewer,
yes,
then feel free to drop us an email or send a voicemail, talk about what your favorite memory from Crime Writers On is, and maybe we'll include it in the show.
Leave us a message at 7-BLEEDBAG1. That's our hotline. And yes, you can comment on the fact that Kevin did just subtly grammar correct me because I said less when I should have said fewer. Sorry, Kevin. And also with us is journalist, true crime author, former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, and certified cat lady and non-coyote killer, Lara Bricker. Hello, Lara.
That's me. Yeah, I am not a coyote killer, but I just have to tell you that one of my regular rage walking routes, one of the trails I do in the woods around here, a man out hiking with his young family this week was attacked. They were attacked by a rabid coyote, and he strangled it with his bare hands.
Yeah.
And
it made national news.
International. The BBC's after him. So it took him like 10 minutes, apparently, and he gave this very clinical explanation of how it expired after he stuffed its snout in the snow. I was like, oh, wow. So I don't know. When I go rage walking again, I might have to have like security protection.
Yeah.
If I go back out there.
Well, you can take on one coyote. You just can't take on two.
Yeah, exactly.
Get some of that bear mace.
We have a lot of coyotes around here. I actually
know.
saw a young coyote out while I was walking the dogs back when we used to have two, like last year before I broke my leg, a month before. I was out in the morning and I saw a coyote and I'm like, that thing should not be here right now. Because I knew it was like, if you see one during the day, probably rabid.
Yeah.
I just turned around and rapidly walked in the other direction.
Good. Showed him your ankles.
Exactly.
Here's the soft, fleshy part.
And finally, our captain of woke cynicism, the author behind the noir novels known as the City Trilogy, and our Patreon book club host, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
First, before we start the show, I just want to do a quick Patreon plug. On tonight's Patreon after show, we are going to be talking about the latest episode of Ronan Farrow's amazing Catch and Kill podcast. This is the episode called Patterns. It's very, very interesting on many fronts. We're also going to be talking about a piece of podcast industry news that I just read about before we started taping the show. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to hear that, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia and subscribe by signing up for like $5 a month or $6 a month if you want to hear Laura's amazing podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. And you can get the Crime Writers on After Show every week. So a bit of TV news, 2 shows that we reviewed this year just announced this week are not coming back, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on it. Kevin?
Yeah.
Watchmen and Mindhunter. Neither is coming back. What are your thoughts?
It's disappointing. Watchmen, I don't want to say it's for no reason. It isn't like it performed poorly or anything. It was great. And yeah, I guess it's just that the showrunner doesn't
Damon Lindelof
isn't quite certain where it goes. Now, I kind of was thinking, what's going to happen where this picks up? The final scene is Angela, eating the egg and then was about to step on the pool. And I'm sure that season 2 would have opened up with her falling right to the bottom so that they can have some other storyline, or maybe those powers come later. Who knows? But I guess he says he's just going to do it, right?
I don't agree. I actually think our future Henry show producer here had a great concept for the next season, which would have been like 30 years in the future from this timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Where it was a whole new set of characters sort of dealing with, whatever. And I think that was a really good idea. I'm really disappointed about Watchmen because I really wanted to see more. However, I do think this show is now going to end up on like everyone's list of best shows of all time because it did have one perfect season. And many shows don't. They go on too long or they come back and it's like weird. Like how many times on this podcast have we talked about like season 2 being like meh? Watchmen season 1 was great.
Mm-hmm.
I feel differently about
the
Mindhunter,
world building
though.
was different.
Yeah.
It was great. And it just is like, oh, it's too bad you can't explore more. But leave them wanting more.
Yeah. Laura, thoughts? Watchmen and Mindhunter not coming back.
I'm super bummed out about Watchmen because I really loved that show, and I got everybody in like my house to watch it and everything, and that doesn't happen very often here. But I kind of was thinking I felt like it was going to go somewhere, and I feel like there are so many shitty shows that get a second season, and this was such a good show. I'm like, seriously, with all of the talent that is out there to write this show, I was bummed out. Mindhunter, I feel like I was a little less enthusiastic about the second season than I was the first season because there were some weird, storylines that didn't quite, they kind of, I was But I am sad that I'm not going to be seeing the handsome Jonathan Groff.
Groff sauce.
Yeah, anymore. Even though he got kind of a pain in the ass the second season
Laura,
too. So
don't
maybe
you think there's so much more to explore in Mindhunter considering they're like working from real life material and the show ended like in like the 60s? Like there's like a lot more story to tell there.
Like that one isn't like Watchmen where you're like, oh, okay, what are we going to do for the second season? We've got to be super creative like we were for this season where we bash somebody's head in with a hammer at the end and poof, he's a new person. Like Mindhunter is like you said, I mean, it's like clearly laid out sort of the evolution of the behavioral science unit at the FBI. Like it's out there and there are plenty of cases that they could just look at their records for. So I don't know. I'm bummed out about both of them because right now I'm in a little bit of a lull with new shows and I'd like to have something to look forward to of shows that I really liked. Like, Westworld, that's coming back. And they're just going to go to a different world, apparently, this season. So,
Toby, thoughts on the end of both Mindhunter and Watchmen?
So I think I kind of agree with you that I think Watchmen, it was so inventive and so unique that I think, making a second season was going to be tough to be sort of different as the first season was from everything else. And it is, sometimes it's kind of nice just to have the one little thing. It is what it is. We don't need to extend it. We leave it as this, perfect little set. Mindhunter, on the other hand, I mean, they spent the first 2 seasons teasing the BLT killer.
Yes.
otherwise known as the BTK killer.
The BLT.
It's kind of weird. Like, you tease this thing for 2 whole seasons. And you're like, well, we're not actually going to do a 3rd season, so you'll never know what that's all about. I mean, I really like Mindhunter, but it's not as though it's like that original or sort of inventive in the same way that Watchmen was. So it doesn't seem to me that there's as much on the line for making a 3rd one, sort of artistically. And I think the 2nd season wasn't great, so I think it would be easy to make a 3rd season that would seem like getting back to what was great about the 1st season. It's disappointing with both of them, one of which I understand, and the other one, it just seems kind of premature, and you wonder if they'll, in a few years pick it up again if nothing better kind of comes along.
They both have in common is they both use those giant letters.
I know. I love that.
The giant letters are pretty giant.
Yeah.
No, but I actually do agree with Toby. I feel like Mindhunter was built to be a season after season show. Although I have to say, Damon Lindelof has had shows that have gone on too long. This is the opposite of that. Like, he obviously can't do a middle thing. He can't just do 3 seasons. He can only do 1 or 7. Anyway, I am interested to see what comes next and what is the great next TV phenomenon we'll be watching. I, for one, am looking for a Cheer season 2, but it's probably not going to happen.
No.
All right. Anyway.
I just watched The Witcher. That was pretty good.
I know. We heard. I just can't start it. I can't. I know people like it. I can't bring myself to start it. But maybe if I'm sick or something, Laura, I will try.
That's
and
when
I'll
I watched
totally change my mind. And then I will be doing an after show convincing Toby Ball to watch that instead. All right. Are you guys ready to start the review portion of our podcast?
Yes.
Let's get it done.
The army has been called in to help with the search for a 6-year-old Ballyshannon girl missing since Friday afternoon. Mary Boyle is 6 years of age, has long fair hair with a fringe.
In 1977, 6-year-old Mary Boyle followed her uncle into the woods, but turned back on her own to return to her grandparents' farm in County Donegal, Ireland. Her disappearance led to massive search of the countryside, though no trace of her has ever been found.
When a child goes missing, there's one thing worse than finding a body.
I thought every year that there'd be some kind of news about her.
And that's not finding a body.
Was there an atmosphere of panic?
Oh God, my child missing on the mountain, on a lake beside it, there was panic, surely.
The army, civilians...
In No Body Recovered from BBC Radio, host Kevin Connolly explores Ireland's oldest missing child case. The podcast is part investigation, part profile of the family left torn apart after Mary's disappearance 40 years ago.
It's only when I started looking for Mary that the relationship deteriorated. I think it's terrible what you done.
She must miss her.
Of course I do. I'm only trying to find Mary, and I'm not going to apologise for that.
The podcast weighs the question of whether learning the truth about a missing person is worth its cost. Now, we are going to be talking about plot points from No Body Recovered, so if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down review. All right, I'm going to throw a thesis out at you guys.
All right.
This podcast is Someone Knows Something, Ireland edition. Yes or no, Kevin Flynn? What do you think?
Yeah, pretty close.
What do you think, Laura? I mean, this is a missing child case, very similar to Someone Knows Something season 1.
Yeah.
Although, as Kevin pointed out to me, Someone Knows Something, its very title promises.
Yeah, can I talk to that before? Yeah. I don't know if, I don't mean to interrupt Laura.
No, you go ahead.
I think I one time expressed disappointment.
Consternation?
With Someone Knows Something that might have gone on.
Wait a minute. We might have a clip of that to drop here.
Wind chimes made of little glass angels, and they're hanging over Odette's porch.
All right. I'm just going to stop it right there. Why are you making that face?
Because, well, as I pointed out before, in my opinion, just my opinion as a professional writer and broadcaster, it tends to get a little purple.
Okay, shall we continue?
I paused here before knocking To listen to the crystalline ring their wings make as they swirl and come together in the fresh, early autumn breeze. I don't believe in angels, but I like the sound of them.
All right, I'm not laughing at David. I'm laughing at you because your face right now.
I'm just trying to be polite.
Why?
So the thing that I think I later talked about, sort of what I thought was wrong with the concept of someone knows something was in the title.
The promise.
The promise of the title. And this is also where we talked about endings are important. Now, by saying someone knows something, in a case where it is very likely that child died in the wilderness and the body just hadn't been recovered, that no crime ever took place. By saying someone knows something, then the promise of the podcast is we're going to find that someone. But what I suggested was that if the title of the podcast had been named Those They Left Behind, then it sort of refocuses what the audience should be looking at. And then if you want to do a profile of the family and the investigators and how they felt, as opposed to we're going to go and crawl under somebody's basement and find the bones of this, then it becomes a completely different podcast without changing anything.
What's the name of this podcast, Kevin, that we're reviewing tonight?
No Body Recovered.
Which is also Nobody Recovered.
Nobody Recovered.
It's a pun. It's basically like a dual meaning thing. So basically like...
Oh, nobody recovered from the...
you didn't get that before?
I didn't.
I didn't either.
Yeah, it's a double entendre. Now, Laura, aside from the fact that this podcast does not make a promise that someone knows something, one question I have for you before we get into sort of like what the podcast is, this podcast makes an assumption that there's a crime. And that is something that actually I have concerns about because we hear that this young girl went missing, going on a walk with her uncle and then like turning around and like she never appeared again. And then suddenly like in episode 2 or whatever, it's like there's a criminal and there must have been a crime. I am not 100% sure there was a crime, yet the podcast makes the assumption there is. What do you think about that? Did it ever occur to you as you were listening that there may not have actually been a crime here?
It did occur to me as I was listening to this. I kind of wavered back and forth because I was listening to these like very vivid descriptions of the landscape there and the bogs and the lake. And it was just very rural and sort of rugged terrain. And I was thinking, I know they did this very thorough search, but it's possible it's going to be like one of those things where like, when they find those people in like the ice that have been there for like 50 years and they're like, oh, look, there they are. But I think in listening to kind of the, recounting of the different police investigations that took place and I started to kind of waver back to the side of there was no sign of her and she wasn't out in the peat bog. She was on the road. So that led me back to the other side. So I think, yes, they do make an assumption, but I definitely think there was enough going on to, reasonably lead you to that same assumption that something sort of nefarious took place here and that this wasn't just a girl who vanished.
I just want to give a nod to your dog, Buddy, who has not made an appearance in this podcast for a very long time. He does have a cameo happening right now. Hello, Buddy. Just so you know, you are a welcome 5th member of this panel.
And I have to tell you that, like, he never barks. So I'm like, who is outside my house right now?
Oh, we know. But we can't name him because that's against British law.
Oh, my God. Is there a coyote outside my house? Because, like, nobody's home but the dog and the cats and I. And I'm like, I don't see any headlights, but the dog's barking.
All right, Toby, you have questions about this podcast. And the two that strike me most are, one, why is there audio of someone doing bong hits at the beginning of every episode?
1, 2.
Second, you have a similar question that I do, except you articulated it better as to basically why are they doing this podcast? Can you just talk about that a little bit, Toby?
Sure. To me, it just doesn't seem like a real promising story. Or if it is a promising story, it's a promising story that should be told in about half the time. Because even from the beginning, there doesn't seem like there's any chance of resolution of like figuring out what happened. The Garda won't talk to them, no matter how hard they try. They don't like turn up any new clues. They can't even say the name of the person who some people suspect, who people have actually made a video sort of accusing of it. They can't even like tell you basic things about this person. They just tell you that there is a person. And I guess they narrow it down to a male, maybe. I think they say him a few times. There comes a point, it's like, where, if anywhere, is this going? And I do get that, there's some interesting stuff about the family dynamics and about sort of the emotional toll, maybe, of giving up hope that your daughter is alive even 42 years later, that you're not willing to say, no, I concede that she's dead, and that'll allow an inquest to happen. So there's like these little things on the edges that I thought were interesting, but I just kind of felt like there's got to be a story that has at least like similarly compelling things on the edges, but then you actually are learning something new about the case that you don't get. And in this case, I mean, you basically get everything in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the podcast.
Right.
They give you the entire case, and then nothing else turns up.
But then you get promised a bunch of stuff that you don't actually get. So at the end of episodes 1, 2, and 3, you hear there are theories. There's a suspect. There's this. There's that. But then in episode 5, we hear there's potentially a suspect with no payoff.
So I think the reason they're doing this story now, it was just sort of slipped in at the end, because I'm like, why would you do this now? Why is there new interest now? It's because the law is changing about who can request an inquiry into the death. So up until now, they've been in this stagnant holding pattern because her mother doesn't want to reopen the case and have a formal investigation and this formal inquiry. But now the law is changing. So her twin sister, who has this theory about what happened and thinks there's more information, she might now be able to, under this new law, reopen the case. So I think that's why they're putting it out there now.
Well, I guess my feeling would be then put it out in like a year once you find something to tell.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I
don't think that was the point of the podcast.
Well, that's the thing. Laura, you think the point of this podcast was what I like to call the Irish feelings box.
Yeah.
Which is basically about like, okay, so I don't want to make light of this family's grief. There is, however, so much Irish feelings box stuff in this podcast. This podcast is, Kevin, it's a joke I make to you often. Mm-hmm. Irish people, you have feelings. You put them in a box and you shove them under the bed. There is
we don't deal with it.
There's an amazing tiny scene in this podcast where the mother of this missing girl, one of the most interesting details about this podcast, which they wait to tell you, which I don't know why, that this girl who went missing has a twin sister.
Yeah.
To me, lead with that.
No, it was a great reveal.
No, it was a good reveal because it made you want to listen to episode 2.
Right.
I was in the car with Lily when we were listening to this. And she sat up and said, wait, what?
So basically, we learn in the podcast that the mom of the missing girl and the twin of the missing girl, so her mother and daughter, are estranged. And they take a very long time explaining to you why, and I still don't 100% understand why. However,
me neither. Yeah.
The reporter, Kevin Connolly, says to the mom, dresses the estrangement, and the mom is like, oh, it's so sad. And then, he says to her, why don't you reach out and reconnect? And she goes, well, I'm just waiting for her to apologize. And I'm like, that is the Irish feelings box. That is what I am talking about. This feelings impasse that keeps things from happening. Am I the only one who has, even though they explained it 100 times, I still have no understanding of why these people won't talk to each other.
I think they have what my father calls Irish Alzheimer's, where they forget everything except the grudge.
Oh, that's
Your
good.
Irish father says that, we should
Irish
say.
father, yes.
Yeah. We're not making fun of the Irish or Alzheimer's.
Hey, I can do it. I'm in the tribe, man. It's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah. So, Laura, you think this is really about that? It's the rift of the family that comes from the pain of an unknown loss. That's what you think it's about?
No, I think it was. So when I went into this, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be re-examining this case and they're going to dig up new information. But then as I'm listening, I'm like, no, this isn't necessarily a story about new things happening in the case or who actually did it. This is a story about the lasting impact that this little girl going missing has had on her family, the family dynamics, the family relationships, and really the country. I mean, it's the oldest missing person case in the country. And it's really sort of looking at, the emotional toll. So I think it was more like a study in that than it was trying to be an investigative podcast about who did it, who's the guilty person. And I think that was really interesting. But I think, again, it went on too long, and I think that it could have been organized better in explaining these relationships and how these relationships were affected. Because in the end, I was like, so they don't get along because the sister wants an inquiry and the mom doesn't?
I have a theory about that.
Yeah.
I think it's because the sister thinks, whoever they think did it, the sister and the aunt, it's either or it's somebody that the mom is close to and doesn't think could have done. I didn't watch the YouTube thing that they kept talking about because I feel like I'd be breaking the podcast made me feel like I'd be breaking some law by watching it.
I didn't look at the video either, but I did take a minute to look online as to what's going on with these different people. Now, they make reference to someone that they believe is the suspect, or at least was confronted in this video, and it was a local politician who has since died, but he started to sue the documentarian, and he has died, and a judge very recently said that the estate could continue the lawsuit. By the way, there was also an arrest that was never mentioned. There was an arrest in 2014 of somebody who was from the town that the mom told the newspaper she knew, and then he was released the next day. So how that all fits in, I don't know. Now, it's very complicated the way that those laws work in the UK, in Ireland, as far as who you can sue and whatnot. And it is an obstacle telling the story. But I do wish that instead they gave some context to these people. Now, they can't say who, the suspect was, but they could have given some context as to why or how this person fits in. They could have said, this was somebody in her life.
Or this is somebody
or
she
this
knew.
is somebody who lives in the area.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
I mean, if you say it's someone that she knew, it points to the family. Because this wasn't her home, this was her grandparents' home, the family, blah, blah, blah. But if they're given some reason why they thought it was this, one of the things has to do with there were rumors at the time that politicians or politically connected people told the guards in those days to lay off. But, that's all sort of mixed in with the rumors and everything like that. So who knows? But I thought what would have been more important to me was you can keep all of those identifying details secret, but if you've given some context within the bounds of the law, it would have been more informative, and we could move on instead of wondering who the mystery people are. Because then we're wondering if they're even suspects.
Right. So I have a couple of quibbles about that journalistic side of it that I want to just ask Toby about. I was listening to this. I was like, oh, I wonder if Toby hears this too. One is, there's something for me about a very BBC sounding British journalist like Kevin Connolly, who in the podcast and his dopey asides about hey, listen to me sounding like an old man talking about Spotify with my young producer or whatever. There's almost a weird colonial aspect to the way that he sort of talks about the characters in the story. At one point they have somebody who has a very strong Scottish accent.
I can't put a finger on when I first heard about it. It was just it was always there, with a lot of photo albums and stuff, and my mum would bring them out.
Joe is originally from Glasgow, and as you can hear, he's in no danger of losing his accent.
Not that you're not going to be able to tell that from his accent, as though he's doing an anthropological look at these people. But then second, there is also this very heavy reliance on, hey, audience, let me tell you how journalism works. And by the way, I don't like it when podcasts do this, but I'm going to do this right now and play tape for you of me and my producer in my car talking.
Yeah, I'll record and you just talk whenever you want, Kevin.
And the roads in this part of the world are just narrow threads of rough tarmac linking. Radio reporters call these things stand-ups. They're attempts to do honest, off-the-cuff description without a script. You never get them right first time, and you often don't get them right at all. For most of the way, the road is featureless.
So the thing about where they do the audio in the car, that seemed a little awkward, and it did seem at sort of checking off the transparency box rather than really giving you a whole lot of insight into what was going on. Because if I remember correctly, it was we're just doing this quick little thing where we give our impressions of what's our surroundings, and we usually don't use the first one, and here it is.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Why does that matter?
The road is stark.
It reminds me of when you have to explain why a joke is funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then it's not funny.
No, I think that's right.
But I do appreciate the transparency stuff. But
just freaking tell us. I mean, that's not. It's a little bit different. Like if they'd spend a little bit more time on, I don't know, like the journalistic ethics around talking about somebody and not naming them. Because in some ways, I think everybody's reflex is right. So it's almost by not giving any kind of identifying information whatsoever, the sort of, I think what a lot of people who would think about it very much would deduce was it's a member of the family. So anyway, I thought that was kind of an odd bit. As far as his attitude, colonial's like a pretty heavy thing to lay on somebody, but he does... I don't know. It is funny. I mean, I was thinking a little bit of Dairy Girls where the British guy, the boy, is there. And, he's the British guy and it's so clear or whatever.
James.
He's a British guy in Ireland.
Yeah. And he has an Irish
getting to the bottom of stuff.
Producer. And like everything he says he doesn't like about the production of the podcast is something she's doing. Like clearly she's the one recording him in the car. Stop trolling your producer on your podcast that she is producing.
And there's also like this weird little ghost of the Troubles, right?
Yes.
That kind of
bubbles up all the time.
Yeah. They're right near the border. And then the guy from the Garda in Northern Ireland doesn't want his name used. And it's interesting. I mean, it's another thing. And that's another thing that might have been a good point to reflect on a little bit instead of, how many takes it takes to get the lay of the land. And here's our first one.
Now, Kevin, you listen to this podcast in the car with your daughter, Lily, my wonderful stepdaughter, as you were driving back and forth on a weekend holiday that you guys went on. I said holiday because we're listening to something that takes place in Ireland. She told me she has a theory.
Did she share it with you?
No. Tell me what her theory was. You tell me.
She assumed that because Mary's sister Anne is a twin and Anne is the one who has this suspicion about a suspect.
Yes.
At that age, she said something about a secret.
Yes.
She wonders if perhaps Anne was also the victim of sexual assault because and this is just if Mary were a victim of sexual assault, it stands to reason that the twin sister would also be in a similar situation. It could also have been a victim and would know that and would then years later say...
If they were, say, molested by a relative or friend of the family.
Yeah. It also makes the mom's reaction of like, there's no secret.
Yeah.
Right.
Make a little more sense. Because when she's saying that, I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
but it also could be that all that assault could have happened, but has nothing to do with the disappearance.
That's true. She could have just fallen into a hole.
Yeah, or it could be a completely different...
She literally could have been walking and fallen into a hole. She was 6 years old, for goodness sakes, or 7 years old.
That is the thing that I could not possibly discount.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that does happen.
And I'm not being light about it. Like, I literally was thinking, you have a young child
it's possible
who's
this
turning
isn't a
around
crime.
and walking back. And
just like someone knows something.
Exactly. So, quick question about that whole thing. Lara, is there any way that you can give me a concise explanation? A, first of all, the mom, Mary, is now getting hate mail from someone pretending to be her dead daughter, which is crazy.
That was weird.
B, why does everyone in this podcast hate each other unless there is a family secret that might be exposed if this maybe crime is pursued? Do you have any other explanation as to why this whole family has Irish feelings box fever, stuffing their feelings, hating each other? What is going on? Lara Bricker, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to say, I kind of agree. I think, Lily, that was a very brilliant theory because in thinking about that, it really makes it all make sense. Like we are hearing that there's this rift in the family. There are parts of the family that don't speak. There are parts of the family that want an investigation. There's this secret that nobody will talk about. And this is like that sort of stiff upper lip sort of generation where we don't talk about those things. And if you talk about those things, you are betraying the family or you're betraying the person. And these are things that happened and we just move along and that's the way it is. And I definitely think there has to be something more going on to have led to such a serious estrangement. There's two distinct factions. It's not just the mom and the twin sister. There's the other person who's like running the Facebook group or the online group. And
the famous country singer aunt.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that we got kind of I don't want to say the superficial sort of version of the family dynamics, but I think that there's more to be learned about what's happening here.
Final question, Toby. What is the deal with the whole episode about the dad when he apparently doesn't really have a role in the narrative other than being the dad that we didn't hear about because he died?
I don't know. When it gets teased and you just see that in the list of episodes, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But then when you listen to the thing, it's like, oh, he seems like kind of a nice guy. So I totally didn't get it.
Yeah.
That seemed like we need to make 6 episodes or whatever it ended up being. And so we'll do one about the dad.
We promised Mary we'd do one about the dad. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, if the narrative focus is not strictly the investigation, but a look at the family dynamics, then I think it's important to include how the father felt about this and how his loss is felt by the family. But I think it's also like an 18-minute episode or something like that. It's not an hour long talking about Charlie.
Yeah.
So I thought it was probably appropriate length for the amount of time that it deserved.
All right. Well, I think we should do what we do and tell our audience, thumbs up or thumbs down, should they listen to No Body Recovered, a.k.a. Nobody Recovered, from the BBC. Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you. You're the one who recommended that we review this podcast on our show. What do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for No Body Recovered, a.k.a. Nobody Recovered?
Well, I'm going to go with thumbs up, and it's not my most enthusiastic thumbs up, but this is the kind of I really enjoy these BBC podcasts. They're a different style. They're not this highly stylized style and some of the things like we listen to in Dirty John or those type of podcasts. But what I like about it is I really just sort of appreciate listening to the culture where, in this case, where this disappearance happened, where this case happened, it's a different storytelling sort of approach. I found it very interesting. I think there was definitely some things that could have been changed in terms of streamlining some of the storytelling in a way so there was a little bit different narrative flow. But overall, I thought it was interesting. And if you like those sort of slower, sort of different sort of like those BBC approaches to the storytelling, like what's that one we listened to where they were out like walking around and we're hearing all the rain while they were like walking up the mountain looking for something?
Oh, the one from
Coal Valley?
No.
Ice Valley?
Death
in Valley.
Death in Ice Valley.
Death in the refrigerator.
Yeah. But this one, it's definitely, this isn't a whodunit. This is more of a, how does this sort of crime affect a family 40 years later? And I think, it's a really interesting story.
Toy Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for No Body Recovered, a.k.a. Nobody Recovered?
I think I'm going to harken back once again to Somebody Knows Something, because I think Kevin, when he was leaving his final judgment on that, said that he liked the reporting crew, but he thought they picked the wrong story, a judgment that he then revised later to say he didn't even really like the reporting crew. But
no, he likes David Ridgen. He doesn't like his writing, right?
I'm going to let my rant stand for itself.
Yeah, that's right. So I like the reporters, and I think the parts that are reported well. I thought the first 15 minutes was strong. There were other strong parts. I am totally baffled by the beginning. I have no idea what that meant or what that was supposed to be or anything. I kept thinking that maybe it would tie into something. I got it that it was a diver and holding your breath and stuff, but why that specifically? they talked to the divers. They said, well, we checked it out. We didn't find anything. It's okay. And I also kind of get the feeling that they're, again, Somebody Knows Something, that there just may be less to this story than there seems. I don't understand why the mother, if there was a family secret, would agree to do a podcast about this. It doesn't make any sense to me. You'd think that you would try and avoid doing a podcast. So I give it kind of a thumb sideways. It just, if they do something else, I'll be psyched to listen to it. But this story, there's just not a ton of there, in my opinion.
Kevin, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for No Body Recovered, a.k.a. Nobody Recovered? By the way, why am I the only person who noticed that?
I don't know. Maybe because it's not really what it is.
Literally,
I don't know.
he keeps saying the whole time, the family never recovered. He says it over and over again. Kevin, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm a thumbs up. I'm not a big thumbs up. First of all, I think there's a little bit in here of the Irish These Are Their Stories podcast. because you could do the theme song. You think you know who done it. And I love that they tried to test the Wonder Twin powers by bringing one twin, and let's see where she goes.
Yeah.
The other one probably went the same way.
Yeah. That was bananas. The reconstruction of the walk. Yeah.
So let's just all hide in the bushes and see where Anne goes. Look, it doesn't fire on all cylinders, but overall I think it's a good effort. The BBC style is not always very engrossing to American audiences because of the pace. Although I think that from all the different podcasting that we've heard, that it's pulled our ear closer to that style. I think it's okay. I do appreciate that they say right off, and they make no bones about it, that there's not going to be a body here. There's not going to be an answer to the mystery, the crime. So we're going to look at some other things. They explain that. They live up to that promise. I'm a thumbs up.
I have not decided yet where I'm going to land on this podcast, which to me is the definition of a thumbs sideways.
Yeah.
I don't want to give it a thumbs down only because I do think people who listen to our show, like some of them may like it. Some of them may be like, hey, this is interesting. It's international. There's like, a sad family tragedy here that, is worth exploring. Plus, it also enters into that other true crime area with that guy Black, the serial killer, who we talked about in an episode of These Are Stories, Law and Order podcast. He was the basis for one of the episodes we covered. Yeah. And so there's some interesting stuff here. However, if the BBC were interested in creating a serialized podcast with multiple seasons, which I hope this is, that would be cool. About a missing persons cases where like somebody left and never came back and no one knows what happened. To start with a story that is so oblique in which they can't actually tell us anything they might know is a strange choice to me. There are so many breadcrumbs. There's an aunt who sang with Dolly Parton, who's famous. There's a twin. There's so many interesting aspects of this that could have been the nut graph or the lead to this story that just ended up sort of being dropped in later. There's a lot of, it feels like, compromises to the family. I'm not saying that a reporter shouldn't be sensitive to what a victim's family would want. However, it seems like there are whole swaths of this podcast that were made just to please the interviewees of the family. And you know what? Another weird thing is that there is clearly a line of inquiry where, the last person who saw this child alive is never really talked about in the podcast. And there's all this other oblique stuff about a suspect. I don't know. It just kind of made me think that maybe this was like a half-baked
They're really handcuffed.
Yeah, that they really couldn't, so maybe they shouldn't have. So for me, yes, again, it's a hard thumb side.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or a random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
I want people to understand this ordeal. It's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Moving on. When the body of a young boy is recovered, Detective Ralph Anderson is confident the Little League coach is his killer. Eyewitnesses saw Terry Maitland invite the boy into a van, emerge from the wooded crime scene covered in blood, and then change his clothes at a strip club and radio for a taxi cab.
The evidence
And the counter evidence, I'm struggling with that.
Where are you going with all this? Is that Terry Maitland, 70 miles away, the same day, the same time as Frankie Peterson was murdered.
But Terry Maitland was miles away at a conference, a rock-solid alibi backed up by colleagues and video footage. Detective Anderson wonders, how can this murder suspect be in two places at once?
I'm as baffled by this conflicting evidence as you are.
Did you kill my son, Terry? Look at me!
Terry murdered a child. Everything he does after that is like he's begging us to catch him. What kind of criminal does that?
HBO's adaptation of the novel The Outsider mixes crime with Stephen King's patented brand of small-town psychological horror. The all-star cast explores the paradox of the murder and the thought that supernatural forces may be at play. We have not read the book and we can't spoil the whole series, but we will be going into plot points for the first couple of episodes of The Outsider. So to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to get our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Now, Laura Bricker, you're a giant chicken, and you don't typically like Stephen King stuff, except you did like Castle Rock, I think.
I did.
But you were scared to watch this.
Yeah.
But now you are in. Tell us what you like so far about The Outsider.
Yeah, so I'm definitely too chicken to watch Stephen King stuff, and I close my eyes. And I even started watching like season 2 of Castle Rock, and I've been closing my eyes. But I'm really hooked on this, and I'm hoping I'm brave enough to finish it, because right now, like the first half of this feels to me like True Detective. It's got that sort of True Detective
Season 1.
feel. Yeah.
Season 1, yes.
Yeah. And it's got that good, like, sort of like, there's a lot of like creepy stuff going on. And you've got like the damaged police officer who's in the strip club who like beats people up and stuff. And, you know, there's something that's obviously happened with the lead detective and his son, who you're assuming has died. I haven't actually heard that, but it sounds like he's no longer around.
No, he died.
They visit his grave.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, sorry a minute.
She's so much of a chicken that she couldn't even watch that part.
I totally like didn't even watch that part. I was like, what's happening? It's so scary. But I feel like this sort of straightforward, sort of hard-boiled true crime detective sort of procedural that's going on right now has like a lot of the elements that I really loved about True Detective. But once we get to season 3, it hits a whole new plane. And that's where I'm like, oh my God, I want to binge this whole season now. There's 11 episodes or whatever it is. I don't think I can wait. I need to know what happens. But I know it's going to get more supernatural and scary. And I'm just conflicted about that because I want to know how it ends.
Now, Toby, the setup for this series, I think, now again, I have not read the novel. I don't think any of us have, is so great. Like detective noir. There's great policing. There's a crime, the trail of evidence. But the suspect, of course, Terry Maitland, played by Jason Bateman, was somewhere else, and there's video of it. It is so perfect. So very, very Stephen King, but such a perfect setup. But because there's Stephen King, you know there's supernatural stuff coming. And Toby, I know that you have 2 doubts whenever we approach anything, maybe 3. A, you hate superheroes, which isn't a thing. You also have doubts about paranormal plot lines, and you also have doubts whenever there is a perfect setup. What are you thinking right now after 3 episodes of this series about
Rebecca
the fact?
just did my review for me.
No, but we're at that Toby point where it's like great setup, great writing, and here we are. How scared are you right now, Toby Ball? This whole thing is just going to come unraveled.
I'm pretty scared. Well, I mean, I'm not scared of watching the show. I'm just scared that I'm going to watch like 4 more episodes and then be like, that was a waste. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing where coming up with great setups isn't that hard. Resolving them is, because you have to have something that ends up making sense within, you know, the universe that's created in that work, right? So clearly there's going to be something supernatural here. So it's not like True Detective where, you know, you're waiting for some kind of more or less realistic ending. You know, you don't expect True Detective to have like a demon sorcerer or something, where that's definitely in play here. You know, I think this is one of those ones that's hard to review right now beyond sort of, are you going to continue watching, which I will. But yeah, I mean, the setup's awesome. It's confounding. I mean, the acting is really good. You've got some really good characters. He does another thing, which I guess it's just kind of a Stephen King thing. Not that I've read very much of his stuff, but this happened in Castle Rock too, which is, to me, part of what's interesting about these is having normal people confronted with stuff that they just can't explain, like the supernatural, and how they kind of make sense of that. And then I think that's undercut a little bit when you introduce sort of protagonists that also have supernatural powers. And I think that kind of changes the dynamic a little bit in a way that I don't like so much. So I think in Castle Rock, they had that woman who, was a psychic. And in this one, they have this woman who it's not exactly clear what her deal is, other than she seems to know a hell of a lot of stuff about things that she never actually experienced.
Are you talking about Holly?
1985, Cubbies Mets. Must have been towards the end of the season somewhere. After all these years, who could remember the date?
Did they win or lose?
Cubbies lost.
September 26th.
September 26th. Wish I could remember who was pitching.
Johnny Abreu started for the Cubs, but was knocked out on the 4th. He was relieved by Ron Meredith, Steve Engel, and Jay Baller. Dwight Gooden, on the other hand, threw a complete game shutout for the Mets. Hello, Alec. Who's your friend?
Cynthia Envo as Holly, who is
on the spectrum.
Yeah, she's sort of this magical, but she's also sort of a magical character, which I think is a little bit problematic because she's the only black character in the series.
No. In the book, she is a white character. In the book, she's not written as a black character. This is a black actress taking
Did you
on.
read the book? Are you like...
I looked up that because I saw that comment you made, and I was troubled by it.
I am troubled by the black magical character thing that happens in so many things we review. I'm glad that they cast... She's a great actress. I'm glad they cast her. It's just disappointing to see yet another black character with mystical power. That's like, it's just such an overdone
it's Stephen
thing.
King. Someone's going to have the mystical
powers. So let's just
powers.
put that aside for now. Yeah. Go ahead, Toby, with what you were saying.
Like, I haven't seen a whole lot of Stephen King stuff, and I just thought of Castle Rock, but, The Shining, I guess the boy Danny has got his little psychic side, but it was sort of a different situation because he was like a damaged child in danger rather than sort of a strange, defense investigator like Laura Bricker.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, like a lot of Stephen King, we should just talk about this for a second. Book to film projects are not good unless they're taken out of the hands of Stephen King. We've seen this over and over again. The Shining, amazing movie that Stephen King hated. Right. It was very different from his vision of The Shining. Carrie.
I think the book was better, actually, but go ahead.
Amazing movie that Stephen King didn't
like. Look, for every good Stephen King movie, there's a bad Stephen King movie.
Oh, a very bad Stephen King movie.
And, for every Green Mile, there's a Maximum Overdrive.
Right.
And
or Cujo. Or the original Pet Sematary with Denise Crosby.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible movie.
No, that was a great movie.
Ugh.
Pet Sematary? The original?
Scary book.
Scary book. Yeah,
anyway,
also a great book. Anyhow.
Can we just talk about like the A-list quality of this show and the cast? I mean, the cast is freaking incredible. You have Ben Mendelsohn, who our audience might know from Bloodlines, right?
Yeah.
You have Julianne Nicholson.
Rogue One.
Who our audience might know Julianne Nicholson from Masters of Sex, but she's been in tons of things.
There's a great list of character actors.
Yes.
Who are here.
Plus Jason Bateman.
Plus
Mayor Winningham, Oscar either nominated or winning, not 100% sure.
Right. But even Jason Bateman, who was excellent. No one say, oh, there's an A-lister. Oh, it's a marquee name. Jason Bateman is excellent. He has really earned his own name, not as like I'm the funny kid from Silver Spoons.
He also made this.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of these actors here are listed as executive producers, but these are really quality people. They're not the $1 million babies, but they all have given great performances and are given a space to be great actors in this space, actors and actresses. So that's what I like about the casting.
Yeah. Now, Laura, like you also enjoy the style of this show very much,
I
right?
do. Yeah. So, I mean, I know often we gripe about HBO with their sound, and I won't get into that. And there were some complaints on this one about being too dark. But what I really liked was I liked the angles, like the cinematography. And I liked how they shot angles. Like there was a lot of times they'd have a conversation going and they wouldn't show the people, but they would shoot like the bottom of the door where the conversation was happening. Or like they're going in the jail and they like shoot sort of an angle on the jail bars or
top of the gate that was opening up.
Yeah. And then one thing they did a lot, and I think it's probably going to come to play as this continues, is shooting from a distance while you're hearing the scenes unfold as if somebody is watching the whole time that this is happening. But I just thought it kind of added like a whole nother level to the story. It's just the way that you were seeing what was happening from sort of a different vantage point.
Now, there is this cascading effect. This is like, again, very Stephen King, but also a great setup for something that you know is just wrong. And the show does keep showing this, visage of this like dark character in the hoodie sort of off in the distance, which I actually don't know if it's necessary to keep showing that, because what ends up happening is that, this child dies and there's the whole like body discovery and forensic examination of stuff. And the family ends up getting basically wiped out. Like the father has this horrible death by suicide. The brother ends up being this shooter at the courthouse.
Mom has a heart attack, yeah.
So it's basically like this family has been cursed and the whole family just gets wiped out. I found that, I don't know about you guys, profoundly creepy in a way that you talk about like not just story setup, but sort of quick payoff. And then also Terry Maitland, Jason Bateman's character, also dies like very quickly in the series, which may or may not hint toward the twist in the series. I'm not sure.
So I read the
Everybody
spoilers.
who read the book is laughing at us. But okay.
I think what they're getting at here is it's again, there's this supernatural element that when the actual mystery is revealed is going to be like the aha moment. But with these people that are being knocked out of the way who are good, decent people, it's sort of, these are the victims of something much bigger than them, and just is going to show the strength of this evil power that is eventually going to be revealed. But I just want to talk briefly about that last scene when we have Ben Mendelsohn, who, by the way, I loved in Bloodline. He was the
He's
creepy,
wonderful.
Dark.
He's so scary in that show,
Yes,
Bloodline. Yeah.
disturbing brother in Bloodline to the Friday Night Lights guy. But also in this, I just think there's so many layers to the relationship that he has with Terry Maitland, who was his son's Little League coach. And there's a really powerful scene when he goes to visit Jason Bateman in jail, and they're talking about the son when the son was playing Little League and how he was like this little guy and how he coached him.
And he had grit.
In all the years I've been coaching Little League, your son Derek was the best drag bunter I ever had. And he was just a little guy. He was very smallest kid on the team. But he had a lot of guts. He was never afraid to crowd the plate, even if there was some great big 8th grader throwing heat. And most kids that short, you just count on them for walks. That's all you can expect, but he wasn't having that. He just kept swinging and striking out, and the kids even started calling him the Whiffer, secretly. They called him Whiffer. I asked him to stop, but they're 12 and 11. Only time he got on base is when he got hit by a pitch, so tough to blame him. But when I saw that he wasn't going to quit, that he was going to just keep swinging and striking out, I taught him how to bunt. And not a lot of kids like to do that. They're afraid they drop that bat over the plate. Fastball comes in, they get their fingers smashed, but not him. He never flinched, not once. And he flew down that first base line. You remember how many bunt singles he got? A lot more than I expected.
But I think for me, like having those two characters who are just such strong actors, and that scene, which is a very powerful scene, followed by the scene where then you see Ben Mendelsohn's character, the detective, walking Jason Bateman on like the perp walk into court. And it's like you see this moment where it's like he knows something doesn't make sense about this case. He feels on some level this guy isn't maybe necessarily guilty, and I'm going to walk with him so he doesn't have to do this alone, but I can't explain why. And then spoiler, boom, everything hits the fan. But I just think that these sort of dynamics between the characters in the story and the actors that they cast in those roles was just really made it. I can't wait to watch more.
Now, Toby, the ripple effect story that we see with the victim and his family kind of getting wiped out, it kind of continues with Terry Maitland's family, Terry Maitland's daughter. I think, in my opinion, the creepiest kind of part of the show is the storyline with her nightmares.
Wait, no! I will not! Shh, it's okay. Tell him to get out of my room. Tell him to get out.
It's just a bad dream. It's okay. No one's here, my love. There's no one here. It's okay. Look. No one's here. You're having a bad dream. It's okay.
He was here. He was saying bad things to me.
In this kind of fiction, I don't think there's any problem with the supernatural. It's supernatural fiction, as opposed to getting a psychic to comment on a true life case, right? I think it's like a slightly different thing. So it's Stephen King. You're going to get supernatural stuff, and that's part of the deal. And it's, hopefully it's good. That to me is like the parts that were scary, I guess. I mean, I can't say that I was really like lost sleep over it or whatever, but the parts that like put your, have the hair on your neck stand on end or whatever that is, are the ones where she is seeing something in her sleep, or not in her sleep, just in her room while she's awake. And the way she talks about it. And then there's the scene where, the detective is like, you don't have to be scared. She says, oh, I'm not scared. I'm angry. I think you're the one who's supposed to be scared. It's one of those creepy things to come from the mouth of like a 7-year-old, to that's her understanding of what's going on. I thought that part was really effective. And I would sort of contrast it to the very end of the 3rd episode where the angry cop like has a rash on the back of his neck and is sort of having some issue at the strip club, which again, I don't know why all these things have to have strip clubs. It's like every fucking HBO thing.
It's our
like
baser instinct.
Strip club.
Well, maybe they own that set and they just want to roll it out and use it all the time.
But he's like, I will do your bidding, or whatever the hell he says. I'm like, oh,
the evil's taking him over, Toby, in the pig barn.
I know. I don't.
Well, those are a lot of elements that are typical of a Stephen King story, right? You have somebody who's a teacher.
Yes.
So they can make some comment about Kurt Vonnegut, so everybody knows that Stephen King reads books.
A teacher or a writer. That's always a trope.
Yeah, teacher or writer, something like that. You have the town, which is a character unto itself. There's always a monster of some kind, right?
Which is the guy, whatever's shooting needles into that guy's back, right?
Sort of whatever the named evil is. You have the intuitive child who knows the things that adults don't, which makes it scary. Usually you have some hero with a special gift, or that has some sort of special gift thrust upon them. And the best one is the bully. There's always a bully, and the bully always seems to be the one that gets indoctrinated by the outside evil and is made to be the puppet and do the bidding of the evil.
Literally every Stephen King book. You just wrapped it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's needful things.
Stand?
Stand, yeah.
Can we talk about that guy who pulls the shank out of his knee?
Yeah, what was up with that?
Yeah, we don't know what that storyline is yet.
It's a whole sideways. Like, did someone teleport that plastic knife into that guy's leg? It's very confusing. Let's do what we do. Let's let our audience know. Should they check out The Outsider on HBO, a crime / supernatural / maybe horror show from the mind of Stephen King and our wonderful showrunners at HBO. Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you. Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Outsider, which, by the way, for the record, you said when I first pitched it, you were too chicken to watch. Where are you right now, Laura Bricker?
I can't wait for the next episode, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the series. This is so good. I have been telling everybody to watch it. It is really amazing, but it really kicks into high gear in episode 3, which we're at now, and by next week, episode 4, which we haven't seen yet. So episode 3 is where all of a sudden you're like, I need to binge this in one day, and I can't, and that sucks. So I would say thumbs up.
All right, Toby Bo, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Outsider on HBO?
I'll give the first 3 episodes a thumbs up. When Laura was saying it reminds her of True Detective Season 1. It does me a little bit, and that's not a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Because, again, it was about this part in True Detective Season 1 where I was all jacked up, and then it just went straight downhill. So, yeah, first 3 episodes, I'm definitely going to watch the 4th. I'm hoping it keeps up this level of quality. But I have my suspicions.
What about you, Kevin? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Outsider on HBO?
Like Toby on the first 3 episodes, I am thumbs up. And I think it might remind us all of True Detective because it takes place in Georgia. The book is set in Oklahoma. They obviously decided to shoot in Oklahoma because, yay, tax credits.
Yeah. You mean they decided to shoot in Georgia?
In Georgia.
Where did they shoot? They changed the storyline from Oklahoma to Georgia.
The original book was Oklahoma, so this TV series
takes
is
place
set
in Georgia.
and shot in Georgia.
Right, but True Detective was in Louisiana.
Oh, shit, you're right.
Because of tax credits.
I totally got that wrong.
It's all the Confederacy.
Oh, damn.
No, it has to do with tax. It's a whole side storyline we could talk about in the after show someday. Some states make it easy to set your show there because they will give your production company a lot of tax-free stuff to do it, right?
Yeah, and then you can sell those tax credits to other companies that have nothing to do with it, so
It's
you
a
can
whole
make
thing.
money. Yeah,
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
So thumbs up or thumbs down, Kevin?
I am thumbs up. I really enjoy Stephen King stuff. Yes, for every good Stephen King adaptation, there's a poor Stephen King adaptation, but this one is really good. I think the concept is intriguing, this paradox. How can he be in 2 places at the same time? I have some theories, and I want to see if they play out.
So you say for every Stephen King adaptation, there's a bad Stephen King adaptation.
And maybe 2.
I say for every Stephen King thing, there's a bad Stephen King thing. And as you know, I am a huge Stephen King fan. Huge. I've read many, 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 many Stephen King books. He's one of my favorite writers. He's also one of my least favorite writers at the exact same time. So every time I'm approaching something that is a Stephen King thing, I'm always like, we'll see. You know it when you see it and you feel it that it's a Stephen King thing. You can read 1 chapter of anything Stephen King wrote. You know it's a Stephen King thing. I love this series so far because I wouldn't have known it was a Stephen King thing immediately because I think the showrunners have elevated it to a level that feels more True Detective, more HBO. The casting is resplendent so far. I'm really, really enjoying The Outsider so far. I do have some quibbles about sort of like the African-American magic that has been brought in with the casting, even though I am thrilled they cast a Black actress in that role. There are just like some quibbles I have with the storytelling that just have to do more with how TV is made than how this particular story is being told. So yeah, I'm a big thumbs up so far for The Outsider on HBO. Kudos to the showrunners and kudos, yes, to you, Stephen King. Thanks for writing this and making it into a great TV show.
Do you ever meet someone who seems kind of off? Whether it's a creepy neighbor or random phone number that keeps calling you, Truthfinder has you covered. You can search for people by name, address, phone number, email, and more. Truthfinder can be especially helpful for running confidential background checks on anyone you're planning to meet from online dating apps. Go to truthfinder.com/podcasts for a special offer. That's truthfinder.com/podcasts to access your special offer today.
I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime
of
the week. It's cold outside.
How cold is it?
It's so cold that reptiles are falling from the damn sky. In Florida, the National Weather Service issued a warning during a recent cold snap to beware of falling iguanas. When the temperature drops into the 40s, the cold-blooded animals become stiff and lethargic. The last time the mercury went down that low, green iguanas were falling out of trees as they did this week. The danger here isn't being struck from a falling 8-pound reptile, although that could do some damage. They say people have been picking up the iguanas thinking they were dead or injured, and maybe disposing of the carcasses. But the iguanas would then attack once their body goes back to normal. Wildlife officials say green iguanas and pythons are invasive species in Florida, and these cold spells help to thin out their populations. But here's my question to you guys. Quasi-frozen, stiff, and lethargic iguanas raining down from above. Laura Bricker, thoughts?
No, thank you. I have to tell you, anytime we've gone to Florida and we've been like staying somewhere at a hotel and we're like outside in the pool or the hot tub, you look up and you see the iguanas and they're always like on the fence looking at you. And I'm like, ugh. I can't do it. And, but I have to say, I have some friends that just moved down there and this was very funny. They just posted on Facebook, marked safe from falling iguanas.
Nice. Toby Ball, what about you? Quasi-frozen iguanas just raining down from above. We live in New Hampshire. We've got all sorts of stuff raining down on us, but not these. What do you think?
Well, my two iguana experiences are, one, I went and stayed at an eco lodge type place in St. John.
Of course you did.
In the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
And it was an iguana reserve where if you got an iguana in the U.S., and it got too big and you didn't want it anymore, but you didn't want to just release it into the Everglades like everybody else.
Or if it was stiff and lethargic.
You could send it down there.
Oh.
So there was the place was there were just so many iguanas. And they didn't mess with you or anything, so it was fine, but it was weird. The second thing is, I've actually seen an iguana fall out of a tree.
What?
Of course you have.
That was in Tamarindo in Costa Rica, and it sure as hell wasn't 40 degrees. It was 95. And the place we were staying, there was all these lounge chairs out, and everybody in these rows. Everybody's just kind of hanging out in the shade, actually, because it was so freaking hot. And then there's this little, you could hear something crashing in the trees, and I turn around to see falling about 10 feet away this big iguana. It was a good size iguana. It was much more than 8 pounds, I'm sure. And it landed right next to this English guy who was drinking a cocktail, and boy, was he shaken up. So I went over and talked to him about it for a couple minutes. But that was not what he was expecting. But the thing landed, I was like, my God, it must be dead. But no, it's an iguana. It doesn't move super quickly.
They
in the best of times.
they move fast, they do. Toby. Holy crap.
They do.
Have you ever seen one start running?
Well, if they're going after or running for something. But in this situation, it just kind of looked around and just kind of wandered off.
So I'm of two minds about iguanas, because I had a pet iguana when I was in high school that I loved. That was very sweet. By the way, iguanas are vegetarians. They are sweet. It's like in the lizard kingdom, you have your bearded dragons and your whatever, and you have your iguanas, the pet lizard world. Iguanas are sweet. They can be very tame. They can be very wonderful. And I've always had very positive feelings about iguanas. Until last year when I took my two kids to Isla Mujeres in Mexico, and we found ourselves a little snorkel spot in the middle of iguana mating season, and found ourselves in the middle of legit iguana fights where two iguanas would come at each other on my chair where I was sitting, but right behind my head.
Damn.
So I don't know how I'd feel if they just fell out of the sky. I got to tell you, we live in New Hampshire. Ice falls out of the sky. Pellets fall out of the sky. All sorts of horrible frozen things fall out of the sky. I'm psyched we live north of iguanas falling out of the sky. What about you, Kevin?
Well, I just think about all those people killed by falling coconuts. And think about there might be worse ways to go.
All right. We should probably end on that note. Before we do, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We have cat dogs. So we have Cindy Mathis is nominating Penny, Shorty, and Sookie for cat dogs of the week. So
dogs.
It starts as a sad story and then it gets happy, just to preface. Back in July, my parents' house burned and we lost my dog, Sookie. My parents and Shorty, their dog, stayed with her for 4+ months. And then Penny, a new dog, entered their lives in the end of September, immediately became part of their family. Penny is very happy. And so the question is, who rescued who? And so I'm looking at this picture of Penny now hanging out with Shorty. And I'm thinking, Kevin and Rebecca, it's time for a new dog. I don't care if it sheds hair. I want the corgi.
Thank you. Thank you,
Laura
Laura
Bricker.
Bricker.
Of the week. I love anyway. So yes, these dogs are very cute, but R.I.P. Sookie. Kevin, can you do your
Anyone who follows me on social media will know.
Sookie, I'm sorry I will not apologize for my sweaty dog.
Good, Sookie, I will not apologize for not letting my wife get a corgi.
That dog decided he wanted to pee on the carpet. I could not stop him.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to pitch to you their cats, dogs, iguanas to be cat of the week on this podcast, how can they reach you on Twitter?
At Laura Bricker, and it's going to have to be a pretty good iguana. I'm just saying.
And Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you online, perhaps on Twitter. How can they find you?
At Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, if folks want to tweet to you and say to you, hey, Kevin, tell Rebecca if she wants to get another dog, she can get any kind of dog she wants because she works really hard and loves you a lot, and you should just say yes. How can they find you on Twitter?
I've discontinued my account.
But you are at Kevin P. Flynn.
No, I'm not.
For the record. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On. And I encourage you very strenuously to join our amazing community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook group. We also have a regular old Facebook page, by the way. Support the show on patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media, and you will get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, and Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. New episode is out right now. Check it out for just $6 a month on Patreon. Our theme song was performed by the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble and used with permission. Our line editor is the very handsome Henry Lavoie. Our social media and newsletter maven is fellow Taco Bell stan Meredith Plunkett. This show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our basement where we often see Jason Bateman hanging out when he's actually on tape doing something else somewhere else entirely. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
I'm working on a theme song for Future Henry.
Where does it go?
To the tune of Sister Christian.
Future Henry, you're the only one who's gonna
edit in.
Wow.
Taking out the ums.
There you go.
Now don't sound so dumb.
Partners in Crime Media.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.